This video is sponsored by FTX US. Buy your crypto and NFTs without the high fees. Hey guys, welcome back. Now, for all Ethereum fans, this video is for you, as I just interviewed David Hoffman from Bankless, and he's one of the most knowledgeable people on Ethereum right now. And we covered some really important questions. That is, what happens after the merge of Ethereum 2.0? So, if you ever wanted to know what happens to Ethereum gas fees after the merge, what happens to the speed of Ethereum, the transactions, where the price of Ethereum could be going next year, and then also his thoughts on these new layer 1 competitors like Solana, Cardano, and Terra. Ready? Let's do this. Okay, so very excited to be welcoming David Hoffman from Bankless. And I'm actually really excited to go through and pick his brains on everything Ethereum, as he probably knows more about Ethereum than most people in crypto, which then means that he knows more about Ethereum than most people in the world, which is pretty cool. And interestingly, he did in fact interview the V-Dog himself, Vitalik Buterin, only last week on his podcast. So, David Hoffman, welcome to Investing Made Simple.
Thanks, Ethan, for having me. I'm really excited to be here.
Awesome. So I think one of the problems Ethereum has is that everybody seems to have a different definition of what exactly Ethereum is. So let's start, in your words, what is Ethereum?
Yeah, one of the difficulties of explaining what Ethereum is that the best answer really depends on who I'm talking to, because it's kind of like that whole blind man feeling an elephant metaphor. If depending on what part of the elephant that you are feeling, you might think of it as something different. My interpretation of Ethereum is that it is a global, it's a protocol, an internet-based protocol that allows for everyone to get on the same page. And Ethereum, as a Turing complete blockchain, a blockchain with smart contracts, can allow for people to come to consensus about much more things than just who owns what Bitcoins. And in theory, because it's Turing complete, Ethereum can allow humans to come to consensus about anything. And so many different use cases can be built on just having everyone come into agreement about what is true. And so that is what Ethereum is. It's a truth machine.
And anyone who's familiar with Bankless knows that you guys love Ethereum. So obviously there's now several different layer ones on the market. So what is it about Ethereum that you guys like so much?
Certainly, yeah. Ethereum, especially in 2021, was definitely a victim of its own success. There are many, many different ways to design a blockchain. And Ethereum has been designed in such a way that maintains a very strong amount of decentralization, which means that many, many people, hopefully the entire globe, can participate in the system. They can participate in the network. They can download the ledger. They can download the state of Ethereum so that they can verify for themselves what is true, rather than having to trust somebody else to have them be told what is true. And this is kind of the difference of being your own bank versus just trusting Wells Fargo or Chase or Bank of America about the truth of the numbers that you see on the screen. This is one of in my mind, the core values of crypto is that everyone can verify for themselves. And so they can verify for themselves what is true. And Ethereum upholds those values. But in the second half of 2021, we saw so much demand to use crypto that it really outstripped the supply of Ethereum space that Ethereum has made available. The demand for block space far exceeded Ethereum's supply of block space. And so we've had this rise of these alternative layer ones to really come and satisfy the demand for people to come and do crypto things. Like people in crypto want to do crypto things. They want to play the crypto game. But because of Ethereum's prioritization of decentralization, it's really pushed out a lot of people away from the Ethereum L1, because even the most simple transactions on Ethereum are $10. And that is just to send Ether from one address to another. And if you want to use Uniswap, we start getting into $30 to $40. And sure, like maybe you can do that like once or twice. But then, if you really start to live a life on Ethereum, it starts to really eat into your supply of Ether because you have to pay for the fees. And so now the Ethereum L1 has become extremely congested, and it's really promoted the growth of the Ethereum's layer 2 ecosystem. And this is where the layer 2 ecosystem really allows for those cheap and instantaneous and basically free transactions. But that is in a relative state of infancy versus these alternative layer 1s, where the alternative layer 1s were able to go to market faster because they compromised on decentralization. And why I'm still committed to Ethereum, why I love Ethereum so much, is that Ethereum doesn't compromise on decentralization. And part of the original goals in my mind of what crypto is crypto is a system for getting all the humans on the same page. And so I think Ethereum has the best shot of being the singular central coordination layer that coordinates other chains, where other layer 1s are optimizing for fast and free transactions, and they've compromised on decentralization. Ethereum has optimized to allow other blockchains to coordinate amongst themselves. So Ethereum is like a blockchain for blockchains. And that, I think, is how we get all of humanity on the same page.
So let's talk about Ethereum 2.0 then, and the merge, because obviously Ethereum had an amazing year last year. I think it was up over 400%. And then one of the biggest events coming this year is going to be this merge, moving from proof of work to proof of stake. And obviously the size of Ethereum's ecosystem, this is going to be a pretty big thing. The big question that I want to know is, let's say the merge has happened, everything's gone perfectly. The next day, what happens to the gas fees? As obviously gas fees is one of the biggest complaints people have. So what happens to gas fees once the merge happens?
Nothing. The merge does not impact the gas markets. The merge does not add more block space to Ethereum. The merge changes Ethereum from proof of work to proof of stake. And the most significant thing with that change is that it goes from Ethereum having consensus by miners, as in people needing to have these big mining computers, kind of what I talked about at the beginning. It goes from having needing miners, big, heavy machinery that needs to be professionally run and done by central entities at this point because of how competitive mining is. And instead, it goes to just commodity hardware, your average like MacBook Air. And so this really just democratizes the ability to take part in the consensus of the network, which is something that really needs to happen in order to maintain decentralization. So that's really the big impact. It goes from having these big central miners to having people being able to be a part of the network consensus from the comfort of their own homes and maintaining decentralization of the network. It doesn't actually add supply of block space to Ethereum. What does when we talk about ETH2, and ETH2 is kind of a deprecated name, but people still use it anyways. What they're really talking about when it comes to gas fees is sharding. And what sharding does is it splits up the blockchain into much more smaller and manageable units and makes many, many more of those units. And so we go from one single monolithic Ethereum to the first iteration will be 64 smaller Ethereums. And so we will have smaller blockchains, smaller chains that will be weaved together through what we call the beacon chain, which is like the central heartbeat of Ethereum. It's the one that controls all of the shard chains. And so that is how we actually get more block space. And so that happens after the merge. So the next step in Ethereum is the merge. And that is just generally anticipated for sometime in Q2 2022, TBD on that. And then after the merge happens, that is when we turn to sharding. And that is when we add more block space to the Ethereum L1. And so the idea is that we split up the Ethereum L1 into 64 smaller chains. And those chains add up to, when you add them all together, it's about 18 times larger than the original Ethereum chain. And by breaking up the Ethereum blockchain into 64 different shards, it allows for Ethereum to actually become even more decentralized because, again, the data for each shard is just much more manageable, much more digestible, and we can allow for even more people to take part in network consensus. And that's once again, one of Ethereum's core values that it holds. It wants people to be able to manage the blockchain from the comfort of their own homes. And so sharding adds block space to the Ethereum L1 while also making it even more decentralized.
And is that the same for, because the other metric that people like to look at is the transactions per second. So is that the same with the TPS following the merge?
Yes.
No changes there either?
Yes, TPS and block space are basically synonymous. And so when we add shards, we will be adding TPS to the Ethereum L1.
So you're saying the merge looks like it's happening around Q2. So what about sharding? Because it seems like sharding is actually a bigger piece than the actual merge. So what would you estimate that would be coming in at?
Sure. I would say that the merge and sharding are equal but different. I would say the merge is about the money side of all blockchain networks are split between money and technology. And the merge really bolsters the money side of Ether, the asset, and really makes it super scarce and also makes Ethereum really easy to run and also reduces the issuance of Ether. So that's the money side of things. Sharding is what really helps fix the gas fees by adding more block space to the L1. It's really hard to estimate these things. If I were to give an estimation, it will be wrong. But after the merge happens, we need the Ethereum, the Ethereum after the merge that happens. We need that to just kind of sit and just steep and kind of solidify and make sure that everything is going okay. So that will take some time. And then we also need to set up test nets for sharding. And these test nets need to happen after the merge. So there's a number of dependencies. I think the soonest that we could see sharding after the merge is probably Q1 2023.
Okay, so let's talk layer ones, because about halfway through last year, several of them burst onto the scene. So it'd be really good to sort of pick your brains and get some just quick pros and cons. We won't do them all, but let's do the ones in the top 10. So starting with the Binance Smart Chain, and obviously CZ is a powerhouse behind this one. What's your thoughts on BNB?
Yeah, so Binance Smart Chain is a layer one, but it's also an EVM, an Ethereum virtual machine. And so it's actually a fork of Geth. And Geth is one of the Ethereum clients that I was talking about. Geth is an Ethereum 1 client. We have Ethereum 1 and Ethereum 2 clients. And Geth was the original Ethereum client. And so what Binance Smart Chain is they've taken Geth and they've just implemented their own chain. And so it's basically a copycat of Ethereum. And they've tweaked some parameters to allow for this copycat of Ethereum to just be really, really, really fast. And that's why the transactions on Binance Smart Chain are really fast and cheap. But what they have, while doing that, they have compromised on decentralization. So this is really just like a corporate chain. It's got Binance in the name. And so this just allows for smart contracts to be operated in a centralized fashion. And especially when people coming into crypto for the first time, they just, like I said earlier, they just want to do their crypto things. And so they actually don't really care that it's decentralized. And so from a business opportunity, this is just a really good move by Binance. But when it comes to the question of, is it a cryptocurrency? Is it part of the crypto ecosystem? That starts to get a little bit gray, because in my mind, if you want to be a cryptocurrency, you have to be decentralized. It doesn't really work out if you're centralized. And because of many, many dynamics of what it means to operate a blockchain, when you just juice the throughput, when you just add more block space, you're adding what's called state bloat, as in there's too much data going into Binance Smart Chain too fast in order to be sustainable in the long term. And so we've already seen that the Binance Smart Chain has moments of instability. We have people trouble keeping up with the chain, and this is a centralizing force. And so in my mind, it's really just a short-term thing just to satisfy the demand of the users in the short term. Because over time, it's just the world will slowly be unable to keep up with the chain, except for this one central entity, which is Binance. And so, yes, it's a layer one, but we like to, in the crypto world, we like to call it's decentralization theater. It's actually just like a database. It's actually just like a Web2 platform. And it just looks and feels like a crypto because it's a fork of Geth.
And is that a similar picture with Solana? So obviously Solana's blasted onto the scene with its super low average transaction costs, lightning fast. Is that similar to Binance then, or your thoughts on Solana?
It's similar and it's different. Solana is not a fork of Geth. It is its own consensus mechanism. And so you do have to give much more credit to Solana than you do to Binance Smart Chain, because they have actually tried to do something novel rather than just take shortcuts and fork Ethereum and call it something their own. A lot of developers do talk very positively about the technology behind Solana. There is just something similar to the effect of sharding in the Solana L1, but I'm not technically savvy enough to be able to talk about it. But at the same time, they have made a similar trade-off where they have juiced up the amount of throughput through a blockchain. And that has resulted in the centralization of who can run a Solana node. And so in order to run a Solana node, it takes a very, very beefy hardware setup. And so we're talking about a $10,000 to $20,000 supercomputer that whole entire computer is dedicated towards running the Solana chain. So it's not like it can be your home computer like I'm talking to you on it now, where you are doing your work while it's also running Solana in the blockchain. It's like a server that does one thing and one thing alone, which is run Solana. And that's a trade-off that Solana has decided to make. And it's been a good trade-off, especially when so many people are coming into the world of crypto. And like I said, crypto people want to do crypto things, and they would like to use systems that don't price them out. However, it does make the Solana ecosystem far more fragile because so fewer people can operate the network. And so when you contract the number of people that can run the network from, a billion possible people down to just like maybe 10,000 possible people, you get a lot fewer options with your security. And the number of nodes running the Solana chain is very, very small. And we've seen Solana as a blockchain come to a halt a number of times. And also, in addition to that, also have degraded performance a number of times as well. And that's because when you allow for very, very cheap transactions, you allow people to spam the network or DDoS the network. And so fast blockchains are also fragile blockchains. And we've seen this fragility rear its head with Solana a number of times. The chain seems to always come back online eventually. But when we talk about the long-term prospects of a global financial system, in my mind, liveness is a very important property. And liveness just means that the chain is always online and never goes down, because we want our financial system to never go down. And so I'm sure Solana can improve on this on the future. But the way that it has set up has kind of sacrificed its ability to be run by the average consumer. And in my mind, that kind of separates Solana into two tiers of people. It's people that can run the nodes and have access to the newly minted Solana tokens that are being paid to these Solana validators, and then the users. And so it's a little bit, to me, it's a little bit too reminiscent of Web 2, where the users are the products rather than the users are the admins. But it's definitely satisfied the demand to transact on a blockchain in the short term. And so it remains to be seen as to whether Solana can actually decentralize enough to be a long-term sustainable blockchain, because that is no small feat. That is a tall order. But they have their work cut out for them.
So let's move on to Cardano then. So Cardano potentially, does this fix all these problems? Again, exploded last year, up thousands of percent. It's kind of run into some headwind and teetered off a bit. So from everything that you're talking about, does Cardano tick all the boxes?
Yeah, Cardano, the reason why Cardano has exploded in just hype is because of the incentives behind the system. There are these things called Cardano staking pools, which if you are operating a staking pool, you have a very outsized return on your Cardano tokens. Kind of in the same way I was talking about, where the Solana validators get all the access to the Solana issuance because they are the operators of the chain. And because there's so few operators of the chain, that newly issued Solana tokens goes to just a few handful of people. It's kind of similar in Cardano, where you have staking pool operators, and staking pool operators, they advertise like, hey, come stake your Cardano via my staking pool, and you'll get something like 5% return on your ADA, over a year. But the staking pool operators get something like 80 to 100% return. And so the incentives are very maligned. And what this has resulted in is a lot of YouTubers advertising like, hey, come stake with my Cardano node, come stake with my staking pool. And it's kind of turned into this game of just like Cardano, the incentives around Cardano is to incentivize all these YouTubers to spin up their staking pools and then using their influence to get people to buy Cardano and then stake with their pool. And so we've seen some of these Ponzi dynamics before. And I don't use Ponzi in a completely malicious way. Almost everything, including the US dollar, is a Ponzi at the end of the day. But Cardano is a Ponzi a little too quickly in my mind. It goes too fast into the Ponzi thing. And so that's why Cardano has really exploded on the scene. In terms of like actual activity on Cardano, it's very, very little. Like they turned on smart contracts earlier in 2021 after being a live network for like 5 years, which is crazy because like smart contracts have been a thing for many, many years. I don't know why they took so long to become a smart contract enabled platform. And they have their own like coding language. And really, they're just trying to follow in Ethereum footsteps, like doing the whole NFT thing. There's no, in my mind, I haven't seen any new innovation come out of Cardano. And it's really the biggest thing to come out of Cardano is this whole like YouTuber advertise your staking pool, get your ROI, get these retail people to buy Cardano and stake with the pool. And the reason why it's fell off in traction is because other layer ones have just beaten Cardano in their own ecosystem.
No, some good points. So if you're a big fan of decentralization, then moving on, we'll do the last one, which will be Terra. So Terra has stormed up the charts into the top 10 and promises a decentralized stable currency. So I'm still doing a deep dive into this myself, so I can do a full video on it. Thoughts on Terra?
Yeah, Terra, it's another one of these same blockchains that have compromised on decentralization in order to achieve scale. And so this is why everyone uses the word decentralized, because that's like decentralization is a shield of armor. And if you don't actually have decentralization, you still want to advertise the fact that you do, because you don't want people to come like thinking that they can come attack your system, because people can attack centralized systems. That centralized systems are weak. You can attack them both by like a network attack, like a DDoS attack, or also a state regulatory attack, as in like the state can come knocking on your door. And that's actually what happened to Terra. Do Kwon, the founder of Terra, got served at the Missouri mainnet by the SEC because he's the founder of Terra. And so the SEC subpoenaed him because it's got centralization. And he's actually suing them, counter suing them, which is a whole nother story. But it's the same pattern that we've seen because Ethereum basically checks all the boxes with decentralization. All these newer layer ones, the only way that they have to compete is to compromise on decentralization. They are more decentralized than the average Web2 platform, right? They are not just a server. They have some amount of decentralization. Whether they have enough is a different story. And so Terra is kind of just falling into that same camp. Compromise on decentralization, still more decentralized than like a central database, a central server. Is it decentralized enough? TBD.
Fair enough. Well, love them or hate them, everybody does love a good price prediction. So I have to ask, where do you see Ethereum? What price do you see it hitting in 2022?
2022, 12 months is still kind of like short in the grand scheme of things. I would like to say that with a very strong level of confidence by the end of 2023, we'll see Ether over $20,000. I could see all Ether being flat for all of 2022. I could also see it hitting 10K by the end of 2022. I could also see it hitting 20K by 2022. But it's one of those things where the shorter timeframes, the harder it is to predict, but the longer timeframes, the easier it is to predict. So instead of answering your question in 2022, I'd like to answer your question in 2023. And I would like to say that by the end of 2023, Ether will be absolutely with over 90% certainty above $20,000.
Well, this brings us nicely on to 2022 and this 4-year Bitcoin cycle. So if history were to repeat, then we could be getting another crypto winter. However, lots of people, another camp of people are saying because of mass adoption, crypto is now going to break out of this 4-year cycle. So which camp do you fall into? Do you think there's going to be another huge bust in crypto, have a crypto winter, or super cycle?
I think the answer is going to be somewhere in between. I certainly think that this 4-year Bitcoin cycle is definitely dead. The Bitcoin halvening, which used to kind of dictate all of the crypto markets, I think is no longer a thing. And I generally also think that it never really was. I think there's plenty of evidence to suggest that it's actually more of a coincidence that we've had these 4-year boom and bust cycles, because the first Bitcoin cycle, it actually didn't really line up as much as people say that they did. And so the Bitcoiners really made this narrative that all the crypto markets rely on the Bitcoin halvening. And I think there's plenty of evidence to say that that was more closer to a coincidence than a reality. And regardless, in 2021 and 2022 in crypto, Bitcoin has shrunk more and more and more into the background. Bitcoin dominance, which is the percentage of market cap that Bitcoin holds over the rest of the crypto market, is at near all-time lows. And in terms of the narrative, the global narrative, people are paying less and less attention to Bitcoin. And so overall, I think the volatility of crypto will be significantly reduced in 2022 and also moving forward. And why like these 10 to 100x gains in crypto are more or less a thing of the past, unless you really get to go down the market cap in terms of risk. But a 10 to 100x in Bitcoin and Ether are going to be much, much, much slower than they have been previously. And so I do not think there will be a crypto winter. I also don't think that there will be a significant blow off top. It'll be somewhere in the middle. I definitely could see a flat to marginally up 2022, followed by a decently up 2023. Maybe that decently up 2023 moves into the latter half of 2022. But when it comes into a super cycle, I kind of think we're in an adoption super cycle rather than a price super cycle. And so crypto will be adopted in ways that we've never expected before. And then the prices will lag behind that, but will be generally positive, I kind of think, forever.
Awesome. Well, thank you for sharing your knowledge. Could you tell people a bit more about Bankless and where people can find out more about what you do?
Yeah, Bankless is podcast and newsletter and a few other things, all about learning to live a life without banks. And so we dive into the mechanics of DeFi. We also dive into the mechanics of protocols. We try and allow our listeners to and emphasize upon our listeners what makes crypto tick. Why does crypto work, both at a technical level, but also a social level? I think one of the cool things about Bankless is that neither me or my co-host Ryan are developers. We are much more into the kind of the philosophical and culturally significant sides of crypto, and also connecting that to the code. And so, while we're not developers, we both, we're early computer users. And so we can kind of span the industries of like computer science to human anthropology, to human history, to politics. And so I think Bankless tries to represent all the best of what crypto has to offer, while also pointing out what might be just a short-term flash in the pans versus what is a long-term like paradigm shifting impact for human society. And so we have a YouTube, Bankless HQ. We also on Twitter, Bankless HQ. We have a Substack, a newsletter. We have 4.5 shows a week, 9 shows every 2 weeks. And then the newsletter goes out 6 days a week as well.
Awesome. Well, it's been a pleasure. Let's do this again later on in the year. And thanks, David.
Thanks, Nathan.